Hi everyone, welcome to the Worthy Podcast. I am so excited to have on the show today my very handsome, intelligent husband, Annie Gardner, where we talk about and give a little background as to why we started the Worthy Podcast. So excited for y'all to join us on this conversation today. The reason that John's on the show today as we get started with this podcast was basically to give y'all some background as to why I'm basically doing the podcast now, or we're doing the podcast now, because I feel like it's been a family endeavor, right? Don't you think?
Speaking of hard things, I don't like being on camera. I don't like doing podcasts. I don't like doing these things, but here I am.
Yes, he is always behind the scenes. And it was funny because the other day we were talking to someone and they were kind of speaking life into what I was about to do. And they were saying, like, I need to do more of this, more of this, more of that. And then you were so sweet and you were like, hey, but you do this and you do that. And he was like, stop. You're being a great husband, but no. Do you remember that conversation?
No.
You have to do more.
No, I don't remember, but I also am a typical male and compartmentalized. But having said that.
Here we are.
Yes.
Okay, so we're just going to talk about kind of the background. We talk about being bold and having hard conversations and doing hard things. All right, so we're going to get started. Ready?
Okay, let's go. Okay, now I know we've been talking about doing this for a long time, and it's just now come around and started to happen. Mm-hmm. So basically, what inspired you to start Worthy Podcast, and why now?
I think now that our kids are older, we have 3 kids, 22, 20, and by the time this is out, he'll be 17 years old. And I think now that we're in a season where we can be a little more hands-on versus like changing diapers and doing that, even though we really didn't do that together.
Right.
And I'm working from home, managing a business here and our house. I think that the time was to do it now. I actually have a note in my phone from 2011, which would have made Joey, I don't know, 6 years old, 7 years old. And at the time, Little Joey was my favorite. I mean, all the seasons are my favorite. But
That's when he had good hair, too.
I know, right?
Yeah.
That's when I could brush his hair. And the Lord, unbeknownst to me, told me to start a podcast. And I was probably, I don't want to say too broke, but I was a single mom at the time, figuring life out, raising Joey. And I was just too afraid to even pursue a podcast. And the mentality I had was, who's going to listen to me? What do I have to say? I'm just a young single mom raising a baby, well, you know, a son, and I didn't think it was the time. So in that note, I just kept writing down topics that I wanted to speak into or to like people to have on the show. And it's been growing, and I looked at it a few months ago, and we're in 2022. I'm married now. Or today I'm 40, but I think by the time this is live, I'll be 41.
Who's counting?
No, me. And I felt like now was the time to do it. And back then I had the mentality that because I was a single mom raising Joey, and honestly, I was living an unhealthy life regarding my walk with the Lord and relationships, mm-hmm. that today I feel like I'm more equipped now because I made a lot of mistakes and I lived the life that I did to be able to speak into women. Because in like 2020, we had just met because we met in 2019.
Of course, that kind of brings me to my second question.
Okay, go.
Yeah, so I know her testimony. I know her background. Some of our friends know your background, but not everybody knows your background.
Okay.
So give us a little bit about your testimony, why you think it's important to talk about being bold and doing those hard things that you were starting to allude to.
So I believed the lie that women can do it all. And when I say that, I used to believe the lie that, and I used to preach basically this, that you don't need a man. Like, women are empowered. And I bought my house without a man. I raised Joey, plain house with 3 different guys, and I built my career all by myself. And that's when I found the Lord. I realized I was really convicted that that's the lie that the world tells us and that we believe. And so when we had just met, I was putting on the Be Bold conference, and I'll never forget this because I had just found and was in relationship with the Lord. So I was like a baby, I want to say, like a Christian baby. And I was at Alta. Alta was right by my house when I lived in Arizona with Joey. And he was behind me, and he was little Joey. And we were talking about the Be Bold conference, and he was like, Mom, are you going to talk about Jesus at the conference? And I was like, what? Like, that was not my intent about Be Bold. My intent was that women can do everything by themselves.
Sure.
And so when he said that, I remember I had to start praying about it. And so I put on this conference. I spoke a little bit about the Lord because he did save me from like the dark place that I was. And then I felt the Lord say, okay, now lay it down and become a student. And so then after that, I kind of stopped just doing that. And I remember we were doing long distance at this point.
Okay.
And I was part of a group at church. And I thought it was a group about creativity, connecting with God through creativity.
I remember these classes you were taking.
And
This is in addition to MC Online, correct?
Yes, so I was part of Mercy Culture Online.
Okay.
We were doing long distance, and we would see each other every other weekend when I didn't have Joey. And my husband's a pilot, if you don't know that. He's a pilot. So he would fly me every other weekend. And on Saturday mornings, I would go to this group. And I remember I was in this first group. And they were like, okay, paint this picture about what the Lord is like, what the devil has lied to you about. It was just something very deep. And so I like to do creative stuff, right? And so I'm painting, whatever. And then they're like, okay, talk about it. And everyone who starts talking starts ugly crying. Like there is like intense healing.
I've seen you cry. You're very capable of ugly crying.
And I was like, I am not talking about this. I am not going to cry in front of these women I've never met. And first of all, I don't want to ugly cry. Like I was like, no.
Mess up your makeup.
Yeah, I didn't cry at our wedding because I don't want to mess up my makeup.
So funny.
And I remember it was my turn to speak, and I ugly cried. And I was so, like, the Lord was just healing so much. And I remember telling the leaders, if I knew I was coming to cry with a bunch of girls, I would not have signed up for this class.
Right.
But that was the point where the Lord was like, yes, I need you to be intimate with me in a relationship, so that I can heal you, so eventually I can use you.
Did you find that hard, having been such a go-getter, such an ambitious, kind of a boss?
Yeah.
Always large and in charge. Did you find that hard to give up kind of some of that control to then actually cry in front of all these people? Like, I know as a guy, it's very different.
Yeah.
And obviously, even to this day, I don't quite understand what goes on. But can you, explain that part of it?
Yes, it was that whole season was extremely difficult because the Lord was like, okay, you have your plan, but let's just nix that.
Yeah.
And are you going to release what I have for you? And so being someone in control, and I always say this, I wasn't single for so long because we got married when I was 37. I wasn't single for so long, or 38, I don't remember, out of my obedience to God. I was single out of my disobedience to the Lord, and because I couldn't fathom being submissive to a man. Like, I would even tell my cousin's wife, whom I adore, how do you listen to him and are submitted? And she would really beautifully walk me through that. And I knew that until I can relinquish who I thought I was to God and he worked in me, there was no way that I was going to meet someone, fall in love, and be submitted, because I had played house for so long and I was trying to be in control. And the Lord was like, no, that's not who I have for you. And that's not what I want for your life. And so when we met, I mean, you're a lot stronger than I am. And so at that point, the Lord was like, see, my plans are bigger than yours. And so even when we're still kind of newly married.
So by way of background, she did have a nickname early on when we started dating.
What was it?
I called her Hot Pepper because she was, dynamite little packages, and she's hard to handle sometimes.
Yeah. And
because
the Lord
she wants to be in charge.
Yeah.
And it's like, hey, I don't need to be in charge, but I'm not going to be handled.
Right.
And then, I think what women speak like 5 times the number of words men do. So then she'd go speaking, and then I would say something very matter of fact, and there'd be some hurt feelings, and then we'd have to work out, hey, I'm not being mean, I'm just being direct. And then over time, her friends will tell you that I've softened a lot.
Yeah.
In that regard. But
yeah.
I mean, we're talking about you, but I needed to interject
No,
that.
yeah, it's really, it's also really good insight for people, because people see us, and I have been told, oh, if I can just marry someone like your husband, he makes a lot of money, or look at your life. And out of politeness and grace, I don't really respond. But my response is, most women are not single out of obedience to the Lord. It's out of disobedience to what God has for you, or what you think that your husband is going to be like and look like.
Well, and like a lot of misnomers in the world, getting married doesn't fix an existing problem. Okay. It's going to exacerbate it or make it larger. Just like some people think having a kid is going to make their marriage better. Mm-hmm. No, it's not. It introduces stress, all kinds of other things. It exacerbates whatever issues are underlying. It makes little small things really big.
That's very true. People ask me, what marriage advice do you have, or what can I do now in my singleness to prepare for marriage? And I say, learn to die to yourself. Like, learn to...
That's a hard one.
When I say die to yourself, I say, you might think you're right, or you're in control, but in order for marriage to work, my heart posture is to serve my husband. My heart posture is to put my husband first. My heart posture, and it should be for a wife, is to die to what I want and ask him what he wants. And so women, and especially today in this day and age, mm-hmm. It drives me nuts, and it's gross. And I learned, and I felt that way, that it's gross, because I have sons and I have a daughter. And I don't want them to marry a wife like how I used to think. And I don't want my sons to not be in their masculine or to lead, because women are coming in now saying, oh, we can do everything, we don't need you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. Some people are calling it the red pill for men, but that's not exactly where we should be going, because that's of the world. That's not biblical. There's a thing through the Word mm-hmm. that talks about biblical masculinity as opposed to world masculinity. You're not going to go try to be Andrew Tate right. or someone like that, but there are traits that have been demonized in the world that are masculine.
Right.
So.
Yeah. So all of that to say, this is the time now for this podcast, because of what we have walked through in our singleness, as we're a blended family. And so now, and we've lived life. I feel like we're better equipped yes. now, and we want to hear the Lord and be obedient to what he says. And like John says, he doesn't necessarily want to be on camera, but he's just, no. The Lord said yes.
Well, and the running joke around our house is I've got the gray hair and the crown of wisdom and all that. And the joke is that I earned them by not living my best life. And thank goodness for Neighbors and Mercy Culture.
Yeah.
To turn some things around. A lot of things around.
Right. Being in community with people who have the same biblical values as you, and you allow them and respect them to speak life into you, I feel like that has been very helpful mm-hmm. for the both of us.
Yes.
right?
Yes. But what do they say? Surround yourself with 5 people that are better than you, and then they'll bring you up. If you surround yourself with 5 people that are not as good as you, they're going to bring you down.
Right.
So, yeah. So I've got a next question. I want to kind of move us along since we're rambling a little bit.
Okay, go.
How do you balance your role as a believer with the challenges you discussed on the podcast? You've kind of alluded to it, talked around it. Maybe get more specific.
I just want to please the Father's heart. And so because I believed the lie for so long that I can do it in my own strength, I want to make sure that women and people know that that's a lie that the world tells us, and it's not true. And because that's what we tell our children, like the world paints this to be beautiful, but in fact, so does the devil. You know, the devil painted, for Eve, like, eat this fruit. The devil will always paint things that are evil and look beautiful, and it's a lie. And so it's my job as a mom and you as a dad to equip our children. And I feel like so many people now have asked me so many questions that I want to make sure that we have the hard conversations, and then to be bold is to do things even out of fear, because there's no fear of man here. I'm not trying to please a man or be in front of someone to make somebody happy. I just want to please the Father's heart. And a lot of people don't understand that. Like when I moved here, there was a lot of naysayers, and I just had to say, Lord, this is hard. And the Lord was like, yeah, it is hard, but just because you're being obedient doesn't mean that it's going to be easy.
Right.
And so I tell the kids that just because it's hard doesn't mean it's going to be like, just because you're obeying the Lord doesn't mean it's going to be easy.
Well, and the other caveat would be that it's not a destination, it's a journey. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of times the world looks at certain people and think, oh, they've got all their stuff together, but they don't see what happens behind closed doors. They don't see the fights and the arguments and everything else. And it's about the attempt and circling back when you've made a mistake and apologizing, which I think doesn't happen in a world that is so prideful. And I'm guilty of the pride. We know this, right?
No comment.
No comment? Wow. Okay, guys, she said no comment once in her life. So give her a hard time. Okay, moving on.
Okay.
In what ways has your relationship with God helped you overcome difficult situations?
I think I alluded to that already, but just to reiterate a little bit, I think asking him why. Like, okay, I'm being obedient. We're here now. Why is it so hard?
Right.
What are you teaching me in this process? Because I go back to this often, because I'm a mom and I'm a wife. If I'm going to tell my kids, hey, you're going to do this and it's going to be hard, but it's going to be worth it, what am I doing that's hard and worth it? Because if I'm not giving them a biblical example of what it is to be a wife and what it is to be a mom and what it is to be a daughter, have a relationship with the Lord, to me, I'm failing. I just want to be a biblical example for them so that even if they don't do exactly what we say or follow, God, I hope they don't follow the path, that we've walked. And I hope it's always better for them because they just go to the Word of God.
Right. It makes me think of trying to think how to articulate this in a nice way, which I don't always do. Sometimes my directness is over the top. Don't you hate it when you have a thought and it just slides right on out?
Yeah. But I have faith that it's going to come back.
Oh, that's it. And this has probably been preached on numerous times, but I think one of the things that you haven't really talked about is you're a praying mama. And something that I admire very much, actually. You pray even when times are good. And you pray more even when times are bad. So I think something that gets lost, and I think a lot of Christians fail at this. I don't know if it's a failure, but it's something we don't do. We're all great praying when things are bad. Oh, God, come save me, come help me. But then when times are good, we don't keep that relationship. He's only there to save us when we've screwed up, instead of us having a relationship with him even when we're coasting and things seem good, because something's always going to happen. And I kind of went a roundabout way of getting to that, but I feel like that's something that people also need to know that you do. That you have your little prayer closet, and you're kind of in there every day, whether we're having a rough patch or whether things are good, you're still in there. So, and I think that has dividends, and I see it in other areas that I'm not going to get into on this, but with family and things that from our past, that that intercession and that prayer has come back, and you see some of the fruits of that.
Yeah. For me, there's no choice but to be a praying mom and a praying wife. And I connect with God through remembrance. And that's like the highest way. Like, I know how bad I was living, and I wasn't a bad person. Okay, when I'm saying like I was living and playing house with 3 different guys, it's so sad to me, because I was basically seeking, what's the word? Like security, but
safety, family.
It's not compliment, but it's like I was basically seeking value in the attention of men. And then I was raising a son. And then when I realized what I was doing, and then when I was playing house, anytime that you are intimate with someone, you basically give part of yourself away.
Soul ties.
You have soul ties.
Yeah.
And so that is where the Lord met me. And the Lord I cried out to the Father that day when I realized that. And I said, I can't live my life anymore. What do I do? Because how I've been living, there's no fruit from it. And he told me, you're not pleasing me. You're not living in the biblical standard. And it's because the world tells you, you have to do this in order. How do you know it's not going to work if you don't do this?
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
What if there's just so many lies. And so when I realized that, I can pray when it's good and when it's bad, because I am so happy that it's good, because I know how it was. Even though to me I was happy back then. I was living my best life according to me, but it wasn't pleasing to God. And so I'm so grateful. Like, I love worshiping because I'm so grateful I am not who I used to be.
Right.
And I get to be who I am now because he, like you've told me before, he's made me white as snow.
Yeah. It's funny, everybody gets caught up in the radically saved, I was the biggest drug addict, go down the gamut, and then, they think it takes some huge thing.
Yeah.
But it can be the small things.
Yeah.
I always had that joke with myself about like, oh, I'm just not the prodigal son. I was the prodigal's brother. And I was mad because I did everything right in life, but I was still bitter and like a Pharisee and all that. And so people get caught up in the idea that it's got to be this radical thing.
Yeah.
It's not. It's a bunch of little chips over time.
Yeah.
And it's constant. It never stops.
Yeah.
It's not going to stop. It's going to keep going.
Yeah.
It's just, the difference is your soul intact or not? And do you know where you're going?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
All right, one more.
Okay.
What message do you hope to convey to your listeners about the importance of perseverance and faith in their own lives? It's kind of a deep one.
That's deep. To be bold in what God has to say about your life. So instead of living for man, and when I say man, I'm talking about your sister, mom, friend, cousin who doesn't walk with the Lord and you're afraid of what they're going to think, or honestly anybody, because your life is yours and you were wonderfully and beautifully made, and God chose you for today. And so what are you going to do with that? And so my heart's desire into even having this podcast is to talk about being bold in what the Lord has to say about you and doing hard things, because walking in what the Lord called you to do with authority is not easy, but we're going to do it anyway.
Right. Yeah.
So thank you for participating in this podcast, sweetie.
Guys, I want you to know that I actually didn't have a choice.
Yeah, he did.
You men, the choice was not a choice.
Yeah.
But I would do it anyway.
I know.
Even
I love
though
you.
I love you, and it makes me very uncomfortable, and I'm still here. So, but, yeah.
Thank you, guys.
See ya.